Welcome to Instruction Discussion, our weekly look at the latest topics and trends in education affecting schools here on Long Island and schools around the world. Whether you're a teacher, parent, or student, listen for tips and strategies to help you navigate the educational landscape. There's a bell. It's time to start today's Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello, I'm Kevin Boston Hill, and welcome to Instruction Discussion, where each week we will examine a recent trend or development in education and its impact on Long Island. One thing the pandemic has reminded us is to be empathetic towards one another, as we have spent and continue to spend significant time taking care of loved ones. Of course, this care is not limited to their physical well-being. It is equally important to take care of each other's spirit and soul. In his new book, Soul Therapy, New York Times bestselling author Thomas More offers a guide for caring for others' souls, explaining what soul therapy is and how we can provide for our loved ones. Today, we welcome author Thomas More. Welcome to Instruction Discussion on 90.3 WHPC. Let me ask you this question. What was the influence for writing this book, and how does it compare to some of your other works?
There's a way in which in all these books, I've written a lot of books over the past 30 years, and they're all kind of getting at deepening life, paying attention to the things that we often overlook in our experiences, being focused on things that really matter instead of the superficial things, and maybe less caught up in the unnecessary and secondary things that are all around us. So easy in modern life, to be just swept away by technology or the latest news or whatever. And we have to go back. We have to kind of go back to ourselves and say, okay, here I am. And what's it all about? And how am I going to live my own life in this situation?
Your book focuses a lot on the therapy industry. So what kind of special kind of listening does a therapist have to do in this type of situation?
Well, a therapist has to be a good listener. Obviously, the 90% of the work of therapy is listening. You pay close attention to what a person is saying, and you hope that it's not just looking for clues that's going to tell you what's happening. You're not a detective in that way. What you are is you're trying to find out who this person is, and also you're not so much looking for information from them as you are giving them an opportunity to hear themselves, to be able to talk in a way where they are less censored than they normally would be in ordinary life. The therapeutic kind of conversations, whether they're professional or just among friends, are special. So you speak quietly, or you may create an environment where you feel more open, that you're safe. You can trust the person you're talking to more than usual. That means you can say things that are almost never said. So you both are hearing, and that's what you want to listen for. You want to be able to hear what the messages, the conversations going on inside a person that rarely get out into the world.
Now, you just mentioned that some of these conversations are in professional settings when you're speaking to professional therapists and so forth, but also even in our everyday conversations, there's a certain level of listening and therapy that takes place. And I know in your book, you mentioned that you say that everyone has a therapist in them. So what do you mean by that?
I mean that therapy is not limited to the professional. It's true that they are trained and they're special, but there are many things that the ordinary person can do that are therapeutic. That means that they are useful, helpful, caring. The word therapy means to care for. That's what the word at its very root means. It doesn't mean to fix or to make better. It means to care for or to serve. So, see, now, for example, I think your work as an interviewer is highly therapeutic, because you are listening to, you're trying to encourage your guests to speak in a way that will be useful for your audience. That's a great therapeutic job, I think. There are many others. For example, doctors are called on to be therapists, not just physical doctors, but the way they talk to somebody can make all the difference. Or a nurse, or even a business leader. I've talked to a lot of people who are business managers or owners of companies, and they have such concern for their workers. A lot of them really do have a lot of concern for their workers, especially the ones they know and are closer to them. And they find themselves talking about important personal matters to these people they work with. And they don't know how to talk sometimes. They say, well, I'd like to help, but, I'm not a therapist. That's the first thing they say. Well, you say that because we live in a highly professionalized world where I think we get the impression that to speak therapeutically is only allowed to these people who have had years of training and experience. That's not really true. We all have a talent for listening and talking to someone in a way that will be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's very important as far as the listening aspect, that we try to tell people, especially as early as maybe middle school or high school, we start to train our students to listen critically or to listen actively. And so where they're being attentive and intentional in their listening to someone else, we tell them to block out everything else and to really hone in on what the person in front of them is saying, so they're not distracted by any outside noises or any other things that are around them. So I think in that way, yes, we all have that therapist inside of us, because we are doing that attentive listening to really get to the crux of the matter. And so how will that actually help? Or do you think that being that therapist can be almost dangerous? And what I mean by that is, you say that everything is, we look at things in a compartmentalized fashion. And so if we do that, and now we have somebody who is this amateur therapist, do you think that might be a little dangerous in prescribing help for someone?
Yes, it's a dangerous business. Human life is dangerous. When we talk to each other, it's dangerous. You might meet somebody who will, at some time in your life changes your whole life. You get married and you've got children. As Zorba the Greek says, the whole catastrophe. It's dangerous. Life is that way dangerous. Yes, you can also possibly maybe say things that are going to upset the person you're talking to. But you've got to take these risks in life. And I think it's a good thing. That's part of it, part of having that therapist inside you come out and you talk to somebody. It's a risky business because you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to say the wrong thing. But I would not get too anxious about that, because actually, the professional therapist would probably be better off if he or she could get rid of some of that professionalism and just be a human being talking to another human being. That is what is really therapeutic. To be able to feel that you are as a human being have the same kind of anxieties, or at least you have some anxieties of your own that are or parallel to the one you're talking to. We human beings have certain experiences that upset us, and we all get depressed at times. We all can be anxious, and if you can realize that's in you, then you have a chance to listen to your friend or your relative or coworker with a great deal of empathy. I understand you don't want to put your experience onto them. You don't want to get that confused. You have your experience, they have theirs. Don't get that mixed up. But you can listen as a human being, listen carefully to the other person. And if you can get to the point where you are listening carefully enough to make them feel relaxed and trusting, they will listen to themselves as they talk about their situation. And that is really what is therapeutic. They may say things they've never said before. That's very common. People will finally say something that they've held inside for many years, and suddenly they say it. And that expression that putting into words of an experience they have had and maybe holding inward, that itself is highly therapeutic. So we're not there to just figure somebody out. We're not trying to get them to say something that's going to solve the whole puzzle of their existence. What we're trying to do is let them just hear themselves talk and feel the relief of putting into words something that they've held inside for a long time.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because I was a school administrator for a long time. I was an assistant principal and a principal as well.
Oh my gosh! Oh my
gosh! And one of the things that I recognized, that I noticed, was if I just kind of sat back, whenever I would have a teacher or a student or even a parent who come in with a particular problem, and if I just sat back and let them talk it out, I found that at some point you would see like that light bulb moment go off. And because I've had people come in, they sat down, they would start talking, that light bulb would go off, and then they would get up and walk out without me ever having to say a word, because they just had to get that off their chest. They had to hear themselves say it. And then they're like, oh, this is what I need to do. So it's almost like they solved their own problem, really, just because they were able to get out what was on their chest and be able to hear what it actually verbally and physically, as opposed to hearing it in their heads. They actually heard it kind of that out of body experience almost. And that really was, like you said, it was therapeutic for them. And I didn't even have to say a word, but I came off looking like a rock star because they were able to solve that problem.
Well, that's a wonderful example, and that certainly is a position, principal of a school who has to be a therapist that many, many times. I'm sure that was your experience. But, for you to be able to do that with somebody, they size you up from the beginning, they size you up. And if they are able to solve their own problem by talking to you without you having to say much, that says a lot about you. And that's what I think all of us, it's who we are. It's not having a lot of techniques or being flashy in our, in the way, the things we do. It's more who we are. I always tell therapists that it's a matter of who you are as a person that is most important to your effectiveness as a therapist.
So like you said, so it's really more about the relationships that you make with the person that you're sitting in front of than coming up with a prescribed set of rules or things or techniques per se. It's just about the relationship.
Or answers, solutions. It's not always about solutions, a particular solution. It's more about having been able to talk things over and to sort it out. These are three words that to me are really important for the therapist. Sort it out. Sorting is a very big thing. So what does that mean? It means that you're able to have a conversation, and not that you come up to a solution, an answer, but that you are able to sort out the various elements in the bad feelings that are usually they're difficult feelings that are involved. If you can find words that help you sort all that out, that's a big step ahead, big step forward. And I would call that maybe one of the essentials in the therapeutic practice.
You are listening to Instruction Discussion on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Kevin Boston Hill, and our guest today is author of the book Soul Therapy, New York Times bestselling author Thomas Moore. Now, you mentioned at one point, you mentioned the Irish phrase, anam cara. So how does that relate to therapy?
Yes, I heard that phrase. I spent a lot of time in Ireland, and I've heard that phrase from a lot of Irish people. They know it well. It means a soul friend, a soul friend. And what that means more particularly, it means a friendship or an encounter with somebody that is not just to have a good time or just to enjoy the coming together, but it is a particular kind of friendship in which you are useful to the other person, that you're able to talk to the other person in a way that moves them ahead in their lives or helps them get over some obstacles in their life. That's what the anam cara is. It's more than just ordinary mutual friendship. It's a special kind where something significant happens, and I think that's part of therapeutic process as well. I think friendship is at the base of it. I don't mean that you become friends with your clients, or if you become friends with the people you're talking to, if you're not a professional therapist. What I mean is that friendship as a style of relating is at the root of that therapeutic relationship. You are friendly. You are not totally distant. You're not a functionary that just comes in and, just like anybody could. You have a certain quality of friendship in your interaction. So I wanted to bring that out in this book, how important this notion of friendship is. It just so happens that I've studied this idea of soul for a long time, and for centuries, people have written about the soul. They have said that friendship is the most important thing for the soul. It's the most important thing a soul can have is friendship, real friendship. But I think it's more than just having friends, is what I'm saying here. It's like people relating to you on the basis of a kind of a friendship style. And you can imagine you could see that as a principle, that you could, when you're talking to people, or am I talking to you? I can talk to you. You're not my friend. I don't know you that way, Kevin, but we just met. But we can talk to each other in a friendship style or friendly way, and that makes all the difference.
I mentioned earlier that, of course, that I'm a former educator, and so in education today, one of the big buzzwords or techniques that are being espoused is social emotional learning. And so that's being introduced in a big way into our classrooms. So I'm asking, how can this book, Soul Therapy, be used as a resource of sorts for parents and teachers and other caregivers?
Well, what I do in this book, I do two things. I try to deepen the work and expand the work of the psychotherapist, the professional. But I also try to help the ordinary person and the people in other fields, like, as I said, the educators or in the medical field, or even business managers. So many of us spend a lot of our time counseling people around us in a way, or offering them opportunities to talk in a serious and important way. And that's doing therapy. I think that's a therapeutic style. I like this word therapy. It's an ancient one. It's a good word for it. So educators and parents are natural therapists. They just have to be constantly. I mean, how often does a parent have to be a therapist for her children or his children? All the time. How many times a day? Teachers as well. I'm not confused. I'm not saying you should do the job of the professional therapist. No, that's something special. But there's a deeper sense to the word therapy, and it means to offer special care, that anam cara Irish idea. It's a special kind of care that you offer to students. And there are things that therapists know. This was kind of the basis of my book. There are things that therapists know that I wish the ordinary person knew, that they had some of that training that the therapist goes through, because you would learn things like how the way you talk to somebody might actually hurt them rather than help them. That's a very big issue. And that's certainly something that parents and teachers could learn more about. You could learn that your own experiences in your life, throughout your life, are always with you. And you bring them to your interactions with students and with fellow teachers or other people. That's the professional calls that transference, transferring your feelings and fantasies and patterns from one part of your life, and sometimes from the past to the present. I expand that idea of transference in this book and try to show how that can get in the way. And it'd be you don't have to become a brilliant analyst. You don't have to go into all the details of this. All you have to do is learn. It's a very simple idea. And if you learn that, you are alert to it when you have a conversation with somebody. You relate to them as this person, and you realize that sometimes your past experience with other people gets in the way. That's something that parents and teachers could learn easily and learn and really help them with their interactions with each other and with younger people.
Yeah, and I know there are a whole section and a lot of suggestions throughout the book on how parents and teachers can speak therapeutically to their children. But I wanted to get into this one chapter that you had titled "Caring for the World's Soul." I mean, that sounds like a very daunting type of thing, of responsibility to heap onto somebody's shoulders. But what do you mean by that, by caring for the world's soul? And how can we go into that area without really taking on too much on ourselves?
That's really a good question. We live in a world in which we are participants in a world. I mean, in our country, for example, what's going on in our country, what's going on around the world. Many of those things impact us and are important to us. And I think you become more of an adult as you grow older, you begin to realize more and more that you are connected to people in the rest of the world. And what things going on there have an impact. They may not directly affect you, but you want the world to be a good place. That's, you feel a certain responsibility or want to respond to making the world better. That's an expansion of yourself. It's good for you. It's a way of growing up. So what I mean by caring for the soul of the world is that you may want to be therapeutic as you are to your relatives and friends and your students and all the children. You might want to be therapeutic to your country. You see, I think it's pretty clear that our country is going through some neurotic moments at the present time. There's some really, really bad things happening. And all of us, it needs all of us to solve the problem. And we could do it, but it requires a therapeutic attitude to the world itself. Also to the natural world, to our planet. To be therapeutic toward our world. It's not just about, it's not just physical, it's not just about material things. The future of our planet really depends on us. That means it depends in some way on me. Not that I can take that whole thing on myself. I don't want to do that. But I can at least make a contribution. So that's what we can do. We can contribute therapeutically. We can contribute therapeutically to the well-being of our planet and to our country and to the people of the world. We can do that. And I think that as we activate this therapist within us, it can go that far. We can start reaching out to the world around us. So
I think it's a matter of taking your special set of skills and adapting them to the particular situation. Because I think you talk about, I believe you talk about several members of your family. I think you spoke about your father, who was a plumber, and how he was able to teach students to create basically plumbing matrices that would help the flow of water in buildings and things. So that was his contribution to the caring for the world. And I think your wife also, with the art studio where you are now, that's her contribution to it. And so everybody, depending on what their special set of skills are, that's how they can contribute into caring for the world's soul, not taking on all that responsibility onto their own shoulders, but doing their little part that will be part of the bigger puzzle. Yes.
But I don't mean just doing it, saying anything I do contributes to the world, kind of a general way. That's kind of a platitude, kind of just something to say that's nice. But I mean that you actually intend and do something in a way, do your work in a way that really improves the world, that really is therapeutic. I do think my father as a plumber was a therapeutic plumber. I really do. He would come and tell me all of his concern for his students. He made himself available to young plumbers who wanted to get a license to practice. So they would come to our house and sit in the basement with him, our finished basement, and talk to him about plumbing for a few hours. He would help them that way. And he would encourage me to be open to people of all different types, people who, whatever race or nationality or work they did. And he was very conscious of doing that. I think, to me, he was a good example of having your job, which is not particularly glorious and glamorous, but to do it in such a way that it actually contributes to the world. And therapeutically, it really helps people out. That's what I'm talking about, doing it intentionally and really doing it.
Well, thank you for that clarification. But now, taking that, I guess, idea a step further, because if we have therapists or teachers or parents or other caregivers or even other professions who are delving into that role, and as far as having some kind of meaningful contribution, at some point they start to burn out because they may be taking on too much responsibility for themselves. So how do people, I guess, care for themselves? They spend a lot of time caring for others. So how do they care for themselves?
Well, you have to do, first of all, you have to do what you love. That's the first step. You have to do what you love. You can't be fighting yourself all along the way. That's really important. And that's the first step. Another aspect of it would be to take care of yourself. You have to really take care of yourself, especially if you're giving out a lot. You have to take care of yourself. When I teach therapists, I often say this, that you've got to do certain things that are going to make you feel somewhat relaxed in your work and restored. Do you know that the word restaurant means restore? That's what the root of the word restaurant is. So I would suggest going to a good restaurant sometimes. Not a great, I'm not talking about expensive, just going to a place you like to eat with a friend. And do that. Don't just skip it, because that could be really a way to restore yourself. Nature, the natural world, these are obvious things, but we don't maybe incorporate them into our lives enough. If you are doing this strenuous work, you need to be out in nature. You really be the natural world where you love to be, not just going someplace because someone told you to, but to do it because you love it. And then simple pleasures and entertainments and art. If you do an art, if you play an instrument, if you do some painting, if you garden, these things are not secondary. They are essentials to your life if you are activating the therapist in you.
Very briefly, if you had to leave us with one final thought on how we can unlock or unleash the inner therapist in us, what would that thought be?
I would say that not to be afraid of it and not to be worried about we live in a world today where we have professionalized therapy, and there are licenses and exams to take for the professional. And there's a lot of worry and anxiety about whether I can actually do this. Am I qualified? Am I confident in doing it? I would suggest to people that realize that being therapeutic in the world is your power from being a human being, and just do it. Don't worry about it. Do what you can, and do it regularly. Be a healer to the world. Don't just be someone who sits around and watches.
Well, we'd definitely like to thank our guest today, author of the book Soul Therapy, New York Times bestselling author Thomas Moore, for coming on our show today.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciated talking to you.
Once again, my name is Kevin Boston Hill, and thank you all for listening to Instruction Discussion right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.